Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Today, Dr. Bob, the stress relief doctor, and I will explore the question, how to stop ruminating.
As you may already know, Christine and I are speakers, wellness coaches, and authors. Our passions include sharing information and providing solutions to help you feel better right now. We seek to be of service to you so that we show you how to relax, how to reduce your stress, how to reduce your pain, and how to reduce your anxiety so that you can have a chance to live longer and be able to play with your grandchildren.
Audience, again, welcome. We're happy to have you with us here today. Now, Bob, would you describe what exactly is ruminating and why we indulge in this behavior?
Thank you for that question, Christine. Ruminating is something that many people experience, and the experience is often could be described as turning something over and over in your mind, a form of deep reflection where you are pondering or thinking over an issue, a situation that's happened to you, or thinking about a person in a way that the thinking process continues and it goes on and on. The issue where rumination can become an issue is when it turns into what we might be called a stuck state. This is where rumination takes a negative turn and can be anxiety provoking, and that's really what we're talking about here. Rumination in the pure sense is a deeply reflective state where you would be reviewing something, and that actually could be a very good thing, where you're analyzing what's going on or what happened. But when it turns to an anxiety-provoking situation where an individual is obsessing about a situation or a person, they can't let go of the situation or what happened to them, and they become so focused that it becomes a negative, stuck state, if you will. Now, why does this happen? Well, it can happen for many reasons, Christine, but here's just a few. One thing that can cause us to ruminate is if we encounter something that hurts us. We're talking to someone, and someone says something hurtful, and we say, oh, I didn't know that. And then later that day or later in the week, we just keep running that over and over in our mind. Another example would be where there's been a mismatch in expectations. We are doing something, we go for a job interview and we do everything to ace it, and then we find out that perhaps the job was already given away to someone else, and we may be ruminating about, look at all the hours that I spent preparing for this interview, et cetera, and it was all a fake out. So we may be beating ourselves up sometimes about, not foreseeing what happens. Sometimes we can ruminate on a situation when people do, for example, might play a prank or where we get seriously faked out, and that could cause us to be in a state that some people might call like spinning, or you feel like you're falling backwards. And so the rumination would be about trying to figure out, okay, what happened, et cetera, or, the common emotion, like some people would feel, they may be trying to figure out how to get even or, how to get revenge. We don't suggest that, but that might be a reason of why. Those are some of the reasons why a person might ruminate.
Thanks, Bob.
Christine, you have the perspective that people get tied to their stories. We've talked about that many times. How does that affect ruminating, and what are the consequences of holding on to your story? Can you explain that?
Yes, Bob. I think it ties into some of the things that you were saying. When something happens to us, and uh, let's say that something is negative. You were talking about the job example. When something negative happens to us, we would replay it in our mind. Part of it is that we've got those emotions that are unprocessed, of sadness, of regret, of annoyance, and that tends to feed into our ecosystem, and we just go over it and over it and over it and over it again. And when we do that, we're making ourselves weaker, we're making ourselves more sad, we're making ourselves wrong. But there's a magnetic attraction, if you will, that we have to this drama. So when people have a story, it can become very seductive. And they can tell one friend, I had to call you because I want to get this off my mind. But in retelling the story, they're not really getting it off their mind. They're digging the grooves deeper. And they tell the negative story of, the bad thing that happened over and over and over again, and it becomes debilitating, and people get into that stuck state that you talk about. I think part of the healing that people can do is, forgive yourself. You made a wrong turn, you made a mistake, something happened to you that, maybe never should have happened to you. You could be reliving some type of trauma experience that you get stuck on. Maybe you were in a bit of a fender bender or something and you're like, it's my fault. But when you keep blaming yourself for a mistake you made or a wrong that was done to you, you're making yourself weaker. And that's when people really need to find a practice to transcend their story, a way of forgiving themselves for, I didn't polish the silverware, I forgot to invite so-and-so to the event. That it's okay, that you're not 100% right all the time. Life is an ebb and flow, and to allow space for when things, don't go quote unquote right, and to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for the wrongs you've done to others, for the wrongs that others have done you. And this is a process. I mean, it's easy for me to say this, but this is something that takes practice over time for some people. Some people may have a miraculous transformative moment where they can let something go. But if you have a tendency, and if it's your style of thinking that you get stuck into something, then you do need to develop practices and systems for bringing yourself out of repetitive thoughts that keep you immobilized. Now, Bob, you and I, we've talked about this subject in our own conversations, and that's why we decided to do this on the show, and we see it in our practice with clients. I would like it, you could share a little more light on this really detrimental behavior. What have you found to be an effective solution?
Great, Christine. Thank you for that question. The first thing that I found that is helpful in terms of combating rumination, or this syndrome you might call rumination, is first you have to become aware that you're doing it, that you're engaging in the behavior. And so awareness is the first step, and then the second step is eliminating denial. So you can be aware that you're ruminating, but you need to move past that, the denial that it's not an issue or a big problem. Because for many people that ruminate often and get into that stuck state, they tend to hold on to grudges and things that happened to them. It could be something that happened years ago. The person is 60 years old and they're ruminating about something that happened in elementary school, and they are experiencing it as if it was a recent event, and they are experiencing the emotional pain of that. So the thing is that they have to be able to move out of the denial of that it's not that big a deal. And then the third thing that's helpful is to be able to telescope out. when a person is ruminating, it's like they're using an electron microscope, and they are just laser focused down to the most minuscule aspects of what happened to them, how they were wronged, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't need to go there. That's pretty clear. However, when you zoom out and make it a telescope moving to the meta levels, so if you want to pull all the way out, imagine you're into outer space looking at this, and you say, hey, in terms of the global things of what's happening in my life or what's happening on the planet, how big a deal is this thing that I'm ruminating on? And when you take that perspective, all of a sudden, whatever it is, it becomes smaller, and for some people, by just telescoping out, it may disappear, or at least the pain of being able to look at the situation disappears. So the key thing, once you're able to telescope out, is to ask yourself this question: how important is this issue? The secondary question is this a good use of my time? Now, when we ask that question, we really, if we scan our past and then we say, well, gee, this thing, whatever it is I'm ruminating about, how many times in the past has this kind of thing turned into some kind of catastrophic thing? And then if we think about it like that, it can help to push us into a more detached or dissociated way of thinking about it. And we might find ourselves laughing because once you shrink down the situation and you go, this is like a piece of lint. Why am I allowing this minor thing or person, or as a person close to me says, why are you letting this person rent space in your brain? And so I just like to tell a quick story where it shows a very elegant solution. Years ago, I worked in a corporate setting, and there was a gentleman who used to have an apple on his desk, and at 3 o'clock every day he would take the apple and he would eat it as a nutritious break after lunch. And so this particular day he came back to his desk, and as 3 o'clock approached, he picked up the apple and he was almost had the apple in his mouth ready to bite into it, and he noticed that someone had bitten out of the apple. So he looked at it again, and he simply threw it into the garbage can, and he went back to work. Well, when 4:30 came, when people were getting ready to leave the office, the guy who had pulled this prank came over to his desk, and he said to him, "You're a better man than me." He says, "I thought you would have exploded and flown into a rage, but you didn't." And so the gentleman said to him in a very calm way, he said, "I figured it was you." He says, "I didn't want to give you the satisfaction." And so about 3 weeks later, that guy whose apple had gotten bitten out of, he didn't spend any time ruminating. And what happened is 3 weeks later, he had gotten another job, and he was making double what he was making at the previous job, plus an expense account. Why did I tell this story? The point here is often when a person is ruminating at the level where it's causing them extreme anxiety, if they stay there, it helps to take them off track. So if you stay in the stuck state, you will be taken off track because it removes the clarity that you need so that you can move towards your goal. So the guy who didn't go for the fake out, in his mind, he had his goal. Hey, I'm out looking at jobs. I'm getting ready to move. The last thing I need is a blow up that was going to slow me down. And so he did not allow himself to ruminate. And I had a discussion with him about that. And I said, "Oh, how come you didn't take this personally and you didn't go into a ruminating mode?" And he said to me at the time, says, "Bob, listen, I'm staying on track. That's not a good use of my time." And so I think that we could take a page there out of that book in that scenario. And Christine, just as a final answer to your question, One of the things that I find is most effective as a solution for dealing with rumination is using open focus. As you know, I'm a certified open focus trainer for over a decade. And so what open focus does is it rebalances or harmonizes our attention system such that instead of ruminating, it takes you to a place where you are more balanced and globally aware. And as it changes the focus of your attention, you can still be aware of whatever situation or hurt or individual you were thinking about, but you're doing it in a way where it's not a negative emotion. It dissipates the emotion, the negative emotional aspect of the memory. So the memory is not experienced as any form of trauma. It would be more of like, oh, okay, I had this happen to me. Oh, that was interesting. Here's what I'm doing about it. And it allows you, by being in an open focus state, it allows you to move to the actions or non-action that is going to be in your best interest.
Thank you, Bob. You said quite a bit that I'd really like to follow up on. So let's do that after this short break. Audience, will be back in a moment on Learn to Live Stress-Free, where Dr. Bob and I are discussing how to stop ruminating.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free. Today, Dr. Bob and I are discussing how to stop ruminating. Bob, before the break, you told a story in your answer on a solution for rumination. And what occurred to me in the story that you told was that the person whose apple was bitten, he took action. And I think that is a really important remedy and an easy remedy for rumination. That if you physically get up and move, if you do something, if you find that you're just getting caught in your story and your thoughts, if you get up and go for a walk, if you do a workout, that you can have some practices at the ready. I think one of the aspects I've sometimes used this quadrant system of your physical self, your emotional, spiritual, and mental self. And when we're ruminating, we're usually spending too much time in the emotional and the mental. And if we can step outside of those aspects, then that can sometimes help. I think many of us know people, or we might have a story that, oh gosh, they're bringing out the story again, and it's 5 years old or 10 years old or 11 years old. And what you said, Bob, when someone is telling the story and it's as if they are transported back in time to that event, then you know it's not out of their system. And you know, if it's a happy story, it's a good story, that's fine. It's bringing you health, it's making you stronger. But if it's something that's sad, do you really need to repeat it with the level of attachment that brings you down and brings down everybody in the room. I think when we talk about rumination, that's what we're looking at. When you bring out a story that you say it and you can't move, you need to sit in a chair for a few hours or be in a darkened room, then that's when you want to think of, let's do something differently. Let's do something else.
Great, Christine. I just want to segue on that. You made me remember a situation from my own life where you saw that I had moved into a state of rumination that was not helpful. That's right. I was in a stuck state because I was mad about something that happened. So briefly, here's the story. The story is that Christine and I went shopping into the store. We made a purchase of a product, and because I had done a lot of research, I was before we went to the store, I was able to purchase the product for more than 10% less than the best price that I had found on the internet, and I was able to negotiate free delivery. And when we came out of the store, we were sitting in the car, and Christine said to me, she said, "Well, Bob, let me get this right. You exceeded your highest expectation for this purchase where you spent a lot of time. So any ordinarily person would be happy. You save a lot of money, but you're unhappy." And when she asked me the why, she said, "Well, what's going on here?" And so at that moment, I said, "Wow, I'm really ruminating on that." I said, "Christine, the reason I'm unhappy is because despite the objective fact that I got a fantastic deal here, I was sorely displeased with the customer service or lack of customer service experience." And so then Christine said to me, thinking about solution, "So, Bob, what's that about? You got more than you asked for. Why would you allow the interaction with a person to take you down like that?" And as I sat there in the car in the parking lot, I said, Christine is right here. Listen, I exceeded my highest expectations by more than 10%. So I should be clicking my heels. And so as I started to ruminate on that fact in terms of deeply reflecting, okay, what's really going on? And am I going to let this negative customer service experience with this guy change my state, change my day? And then I started to feel better right away. And so the first thing is that Christine had done there was to make me aware that I was ruminating. And then I had to move out of denial that, it was really that bad, because it really was. And then I had to be okay with, not trying to get even with the guy, not being in a place where I feel like I have to win. I have to go back in there and get revenge on the guy. Hey, I already got a great deal. Just go home and enjoy the product. And that's what we did. And so, Christine, I want to thank you for that, because this is a case where I had to take my own medicine.
You're welcome, Bob. And that is a great example that in that moment, your mind went to the one thing that was unpleasant, and it took it and it ran with it. Whether you were linking with other past things, you took the one thing, you got everything you want, you got more and better than what you intended. But your mind just really needed to be redirected, and a big part of it was the awareness. When I flagged you on it, you kind of looked, why am I in a mood when I got what I wanted? I got more than what I wanted.
Well, Christine, I think you just hit the nail on the head here with something which you opened the door for another podcast at another time. But audience, this issue of you got 99 things right, and your mind is focusing and getting keyed in on to the one thing that didn't go right or that doesn't fit or what's wrong. So that is something to think about in the context of ruminating, that if you step back and can have the presence of mind to say, hey, listen, I've had a great week. I've been on vacation. I got a raise. or my bills, I got some bills cut back, and then you're going through a stack of papers and you get a paper cut, and then so we know the rest of it. And then if you focus on the paper cut, of course, why did this happen? How could this happen? I haven't cut my finger in over 10 years, and now it's bleeding, and now it's going to get infected. So the thing is, how minor is that? And not to say that there's never a thing that we're ruminating is not important, because sometimes they're important and they're urgent, etc. But the preponderance of the time, the majority of the time, if we're honest with ourselves, many of the things that we ruminate on are they're minor. Christine, I hope you don't mind if I tell this quick story. When Christine and I first got married, I used to love to cook for Christine, and I still cook for Christine, and I enjoy cooking for Christine. But one of the things that when you're adjusting to you living together, Christine was very upset that sometimes that when I would cut the meat or whatever, or cut vegetables, I would cut them while they were in the frying pan, and I was scratching up the pot. Of course, I wasn't aware of it at the time, because when I was rushing, when I was cooking, I didn't use a chopping board or whatever. I just, look, there's onions in here, they're not fully chopped, I just chopped them in the pan. And that was something that, for Christine, at that time, was a pet peeve. So once I became aware of it, of course I stopped doing it, but I believe she ruminated on that for a while, Christine.
I don't know so much that I did. I might have. I think what I've come to learn over time with you, because if you want to use that story, I think there are aspects where we're both right. No need to scratch the pan. And also on the other side, no reason to get upset over a pan being scratched. It's just a pot, as you have said. It can be replaced. But I think it's about you and I, we're different people, different personalities, different styles. And I think, and one of the things that, we've joked at sometimes is I'll use something and you can't even tell it was touched because I'll put it back in such a state. Whereas if you used something, it's noticed that it's used. You don't put the thing back together again.
Well, Christine, at Christmas time, when we were kids, you knew that the wrapping paper had been ripped off the gifts, that we did not use scissors. So, Christine, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to just move to this other area that we've talked about often, and this is the issue that you have a tendency to be sentimental, and I'm sentimental too in many ways. When someone has this behavior or trait, how does it affect whether someone ruminates in your view?
This is just purely, from my own experience. I'm sure there's probably research out there that would support this, but it's been my experience and observation that if someone is sentimental or sensitive, that those traits would lend itself to ruminating. I know for myself, I give life to everything, and what we're talking about a moment ago in the pot, the pot's alive. You have to be good to the pot. Oh my gosh, you're scratching the pot. So I think because I project or overlay so many emotions and sentiment onto inanimate objects that I weave stories into things and situations that may or may not be accurate or true or real. And in doing that, I would tend to go over the thought and over the thought and over the thought. And I've seen that in social situations where, a hostess is putting together a party or an event and they miss one thing. They didn't have out the salad fork in the right place. Everybody had a great time at the dinner, but this, hostess who was particular about how the table was arranged or how things are done, that they get stuck on that. And years later when they discuss the party or the event, they're not saying, oh my gosh, this was wonderful, everybody had such a good time, this was the first time everybody was together. And all they could think of is, I had out the wrong fork. So I believe that when someone is sentimental, the factors that lend itself to being sentimental are also the factors that would lead to repeating a story in your head or your mind, and especially that thing of when something goes wrong. I mean, I believe it is a survival mechanism. If something goes right, you just keep moving forward smoothly and easily. But if something goes wrong, that's what you latch onto because you want to correct that in the future. The issue with ruminating is you're not thinking of how to change this or how to make it better. You're generally beating yourself up with the same sad, bad story. And that's where we need to transform our story rather than to keep repeating it as is. So it's good to be caring and compassionate and feeling, and to notice what someone else may need or what you may need. But when you get caught in it, when you get caught in a thought or feeling, and it physically immobilizes you or emotionally immobilizes you, then you know you've made a wrong turn. And that's where you need to have, like on the game show, a lifeline. Call a friend, do an activity, but find a way to let go. It's okay to throw out, an object. It's okay to give away a treasured piece of jewelry that someone gave you. It's fine. Life is temporal. Objects are temporal. Events are temporal. There's an aspect of our thinking sometimes in some people, and we get into this absolute thing of always and forever and must have. We can recapture things again. There can be an ebb and a flow, and it's okay. And maybe sometimes when we are sentimental, we easily get into forever. And maybe some things are forever, but many things are not. And for us to be okay with that, and for us to step into resilience and change, and to accept that we have moments when things are different, and that's okay. And different happy is good.
Wow, Christine, you have opened the door to 2 additional podcasts. I just wanted to make you aware, by talking about rumination in the way that you have, the first thing it raised in my mind was, sometimes when we're ruminating, the issue that we're ruminating over has to do with our sense of loss. And so when it's that, it's very deep. We're grieving. It's actually existential loss. I remember the time when I had thrown out one of your pots where I had said the handle was broken, and you had even agreed that I could throw it out. And when I did, that was still very hurtful to you. And so at that time, I didn't really understand it. And now this is years later. Of course, I understand that it's not just the fact of whether or not the pot has consciousness, et cetera. It's that you had very fond memories attached to using that pot. And when you saw it, even though the handle, I saw it as a safety issue. If you boil water in this pot, the handle could break and you could get scalded. I wasn't sensitive to your past positive memories, and that by just throwing that pot out like that it was like ripping a part of you out. And so that is something that we can talk about on another podcast, this thing of existential loss. And then the other thing that your response brought out in me is it made me think of, for our audience, that this issue of dealing with rumination can be looked at from a neuropsychological standpoint. Neuroscience, the recent studies by Rick Hansen, Mark Wallman, Srini Pillay, all neuroscientists, talk about the negativity bias of the brain. Of course, in this case, science is late to the party because many religious and philosophical traditions have known about the negativity bias of the mind, and that is what meditation is all about. For example, the Buddhist tradition, et cetera, the monkey mind, et cetera. If you don't do something, then the mind will automatically go to the negative. And I think most people would agree that if just allowed to do whatever the mind does, it does tend to look at what's wrong, and then from what's wrong, it runs. It's like a cat with a string, or like you pull a loose string on the suit. So I want to thank you for that, Christine. So those are two doors that you have opened for future podcasts for us, and thank you for that.
You're welcome. Bob, as you were talking, I was reminded of something I'd read in a book by Karen Kingston. It was about feng shui, and she talked about people who have trouble discarding things. And what she said was to take a photo of it. The stories that you mentioned, what has happened to me is sometimes I will remember where I bought an object, or if an object was given to me as a gift, or if there's a story behind it. For example, I have a piece of jewelry, and it was given to me by my aunt. Her husband, who loved her dearly, gave it to her. She never liked it, so she gave it to me, and she said, "Don't tell him I gave it to you." So it no longer fits me, but I have it, and in my mind, this thing is very precious, although I don't use it, and I'm saying, who will I gift this to next? So this thing of having an attachment to an object, for me and for other people with sentiment, there's again this story around it, and that's where the energy comes from. But I like what you said, and I think it's good for all of us to be mindful of it, that our mind needs to be directed, because it may take us down a path of negativity that's not in our best interest. So we really want to be conscious of what we're thinking and how we're behaving, and we really want to direct our mind to move us in the places that we want to go that will be for our good. So, Bob, in looking at this thing on sentiment and how the mind works, it brings up to mind a question that I think would shed some more light on this activity of ruminating. Bob, what role, if any, does the reticular activating system play in ruminating?
Thanks for asking that question, Christine. First of all, for the audience who may not be familiar with the reticular activating system, I think it'd be important to just shed some light on what it is. Well, the reticular activating system is part of the brain, is actually in the brain stem, and it affects the wakefulness and our sleep transitions, wake to sleep, being asleep and being awake, and the transitioning from sleep to wakefulness, and affecting our circadian rhythm. It also, importantly, plays a key role in attention. And so, as it may be obvious to anyone that's ever ruminated, ruminating could be described as a way of paying attention to someone or some issue or person that in a way that's very narrow focus. And so in that particular case, the reticular activating system would be keyed in on that thing or event, etc. And so what's interesting is that many of us are familiar in NLP parlance, or I believe that would be more accurately to say in law of attraction parlance, that whatever you focus on has a tendency to expand. And that's not just law of attraction. That's in many traditions that people have said that through since ancient times, that whatever you focus on tends to expand. In this particular case, by focusing on where the rumination turns into an anxiety-provoking kind of event, where the reticular activating system is playing a key role, is that it is directly connected to our pain pathways. A lot of recent research has demonstrated that the reticular activating system is directly connected in so many ways, and through the use of both neurotransmitters and hormones. And another very key issue is that besides affecting the circadian rhythm, that the reticular activating system has an effect on the nitric oxide. And so in this particular case, what we're talking about when a person would be ruminating at the anxiety-provoking level, what that would mean is that their nitric oxide level would be flatline. And so I think no need to go into any deep detail, but most people would recognize that flatlining is not good. It's like having a flat tire on your car, flatlining, a heart attack or brain waves, etc. So the flatlining here would be causing emotional pain. And so by the spiking, or I should say the lack of nitric oxide, and so it allows some of the other neurotransmitters that make us sad to be out of control and unchecked. And so by learning how to get control of the reticular activating system in a positive way through, for example, using open focus, that can take you out of the ruminating state. Of course, many people use other techniques such as hypnosis or neurolinguistic programming or cognitive behavioral therapy or biofeedback or neurofeedback to achieve the same things. But the point is to be able to move out of that stuck state, that the reticular activating system plays a key role. And when we learn how to modulate it ourselves, which is what we're doing through the simple acts of changing our attention, that's a really good thing.
Thank you so much, Bob. I did not realize fully how significant that question was because, as you often say, that's room for another podcast. I think simply having a podcast to teach our audience about the reticular activating system, but then I guess that would really be a change in focus.
It definitely would, because a lot of the success and achievement literature talks about the power of the reticular activating system. I recall many years ago reading from the works of Dennis Waitley and from Cybervision Systems, where they talk about specifically how people who have made tremendous achievements, that when you've been able to take a look at how their reticular activating system is working, it works to put them in a flow state. And so that is certainly fodder for actually a series of podcasts, because we're talking about a huge area here.
Well, as we see it, and we are near the end of this interview, a lot of this is what you and I have discovered in our relationship with each other and in our work. This is about attention. How do we pay attention? What are we paying attention to? And that's the issue with ruminating. If ruminating is taking time from your life, that you're spending time thinking about something that has passed, that is not serving you, that does not make you feel well, then you need to do something differently. So listeners, we want to thank you for spending this time with us today. And Bob, I want to thank you for a great conversation and sharing this information that hopefully will be helpful.
Thank you, Christine.
So listeners, if you would like to learn more about the services that we offer, go to www.stressfreenow.info. You can subscribe to our newsletters and our podcasts. You can listen to past podcast interviews, and we, as always, appreciate your comments and feedbacks and reviews. You can also read our articles and blog posts on the website. Dr. Bob and I offer individual coaching sessions. We're also available for keynote speaking and stress management and wellness training. If you'd like to learn more or get in touch, again, go to stressfreenow.info and look for our contact form. You can write us there or give us a call at 954-900-2179.
Christine, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
I think I'll follow up with what I said a moment ago. Notice what you're paying attention to. Be aware of your thoughts and learn how to direct your thoughts in a way that serve you. I start my day with affirmations and reflections on my good. So if you can find and develop a practice that focuses your attention on something to move you forward. That will bring you good results. Bob, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Audience, one of the key lessons that I have learned about rumination is not to take things personally, especially when you feel that you've been wronged or you've been faked out. Although that may hurt, following the old saw of don't sweat the small stuff, and that it's all small stuff, that's what I'd like you to leave you with, that in the scheme of things, that the best use of your time is to have clarity so that you stay focused on what you really want.
Thank you so much, Bob, and audience, thank you for listening.
So, audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank you for joining us today, wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in right now. We appreciate, as always, your presence, and we trust that you'll benefit in some unique way from the information we deliver to you during today's show. We welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about our podcast. Please let us know if there are additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or whether there is a guest you enjoyed so much that you'd like us to invite them back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you will receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today to see how we can help you up your game. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of StressFreeNow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.